And but one thing I never talk about, even though Roy's fought more fights, he's knocked out 47 guys.
Let's go! Let's go!
So
he knocked out more people than Iron Mike Tyson.
Hi, this is Joe Cortez. You're watching ShowBizz, The Adult.
Oh, this is Bernard Hopkins, ShowBizz, The Adult. I'm out.
What's up, my people? This is ShowBizz, The Adult. All right, man, look who we have here. Look who we have here. We have the co-founder with his father of a world-class boxing gym. Also former trainer of Calvin Brock. And I got to throw that in there because he was one of my favorite heavyweights back in the day. Yeah. And now currently the trainer of my favorite fighter of all time, the man Roy Jones Jr. Welcome, Tom. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me on, ShowBizz. Love the videos, man. Love it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy that we were actually, able to meet up on this. I mean, this is a big deal. Roy Jones Jr. versus Iron Mike Tyson. You can't really, I don't know how much people understand about this. This is a big deal. Two huge names, icons, going to be in the ring come November 28th. This is big time, Tom.
For sure. I mean, the two most electrifying fighters in the last 35, 40 years, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's just fireworks, and the whole world wants to see it.
Absolutely. So we have to start like this, Tom. First and foremost, I want to say this. I looked you up. The Stay Off the Streets, your efforts for a charity for underprivileged children. That is amazing work. I think that is your most important work beyond the training and what you've done for us boxing fans. I think this should be highlighted first and foremost. If you can, just let us know what that means to you and your efforts being recognized for so much charity and what you've been doing with underprivileged children.
Oh, I really appreciate that. A lot of people don't ever touch on that as much, but I was talking about it today with someone. Really try to reach out to as many people of all kids of all walks of life, and try to keep the door open to any kid. And that's what it's about, man. It's about giving back to the community and getting kids off the streets and getting them doing things productively. And boxing is just a great outlet for kids because you're building self-esteem, you're building character. You get kids to really understand. Like, a lot of people look at boxing as a sport where they think it's promoting violence. It's actually doing the opposite, because you have a kid who can't defend himself. What happens is the opposite. He wants to be a bully, because he wants to build his self-esteem off of something that's false. But once he comes to a boxing gym and he really learns how to defend himself, he no longer wants to pick on somebody to build that self-esteem, because he has self-esteem. And then at the same time, he always learns that there's someone else out there tougher. And so you're learning both sides of the coin there. You're learning when you come to a boxing gym that you build self-esteem so you don't have to pick on somebody that's not as tough as you or doesn't have boxing skills or you think that you can pick on. So you learn self-confidence and self-esteem, so you don't have to go picking on people. And then the second thing, if you were a bully, you start to also realize that you pick on the wrong person.
That's right.
You're in a boxing gym, you always find out there's someone tougher. If you've been in it for a while, so the more as time goes on, you're building both sides of the coin with someone's character. They're realizing that they're being humbled. They're being humbled at the same time they're building self-esteem. So that's huge. You can combine both of those. You're building someone's self-esteem. You're building work ethic. You're building discipline, dedication. And you're teaching them not just the sport. You're teaching them how to have work ethic in other walks of their life. You know what I mean? So that's and at the same time you're walking that life as a humble person as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Just to jump in there, when I took on martial arts, and I do consider boxing as a form of martial arts. I do. Yeah. When I took on martial arts, that was one of the first things I learned was that they're training me physically. Okay. So I can build that self-esteem in myself. So later I will have the self-esteem, the security to not actually use those things. If somebody were to try to threaten me, I know what I am made of, and maybe I can diffuse it with my words, but it starts physically, then it goes to a mental, and then it goes to spiritual building. And that is great what you're doing. So we definitely applaud you for that. That's awesome, Tom. Awesome.
I appreciate that, ShowBizz. Appreciate it, man. I've had so many success stories of kids that have come into our program that don't become successful in boxing, but they've taken what they've learned in the program. They've learned, like I said, dedication, discipline, work ethic, and they've been successful in life doing other things other than boxing. So, you know what I mean? It's not all about just building a champion. It's about building a champion in life outside of the boxing gym. You know what I mean?
I got to ring a bell. Let's ring a bell for that. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And that's why I love speaking to people like you. My next question is this. I also went to your YouTube channel. Okay. What's that? World Class Boxing channel?
Yes.
Right? So everybody, make sure you go by there if you want to learn just extra fundamentals about boxing, all the things that you may think you know, you can learn a little bit more. And that's the big thing about Roy Jones Jr. too. We know Roy Jones Jr. is a great, vast, well-experienced fighter, and still he needs a trainer. So you can always learn more. So please make sure you go by his channel and subscribe. And I was looking at those things. I was looking at you talking about the jab, the feint, the jab, feint, hook. I was looking at you speak on even how to get out of a clinch properly. I thought that was amazing. So my question to you is, how did you, or when, or what caused you to have an interest in boxing? Like, how did that even start?
Well, I come from a boxing family. And when I say boxing family, both sides of my family was boxing. It was boxing oriented. My grandfather, my mother's dad, he was a military boxer. He boxed. He was all service. And my dad's brother, same thing, military. They boxed in the military. So when I grew up, they introduced me to boxing at a very early age. I was 5 years old. So
wow.
I really don't remember, like, the first thing I remember, first sport I remember learning was boxing. It wasn't basketball, it wasn't football, it wasn't baseball, it was boxing. So they used to train me, and my dad built a little basement in my house, a little gym basement in the house. And they started to teach me. It was my dad, my uncle, and my grandfather,
Wow.
So I had both families that were boxing oriented. My other uncle just loved boxing. So they always took me to fights. That was the first thing that was on TV, not a football game, but it was a boxing match. So I grew up loving the sport, and I had an amateur career, and it got halted by injuries when I was 16, 17 years old.
What kind of injuries?
I had 4 shoulder surgeries. I had, yeah.
Yeah.
You know all about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, within like a 4-year period, I had 4 surgeries from the ages of 16 to 20. Almost 17 to 20 years old. So from there, it really kind of put a damper and a halt on what I wanted to do as far as.
I can imagine.
And, but I had, people were always telling me you had too much knowledge. I had a friend who told me you should open up a gym. You should start a gym. You could give back to your knowledge, if you're not, because I really didn't know if I was ever going to try to box again at the time. So that's what happened. And actually there was another gym locally here that was open, and I started to go into that gym in 1991. I was 20 years old, and I started helping train kids in that gym. And then 2 years later, I opened up my own gym in 1993. So I've been training fighters 91. I've been having my own gym since 1993. And I came back for a short period of time, and I did have a couple more amateur fights. But I got an opportunity that I met Paul Spadafora, who was my first champion in 1999. And Paul, wanted me to work with him, wanted me to train him. He had a trainer in the past that he had grew up with, that he was when he was a young boy, and then as he got older and he turned professional, his trainer passed away. So he asked me if I would work with him, and that was back in 1997. And I started working with Paul, and then 2.5 years later, he became lightweight champion of the world. And the story goes from there. You know?
Hold on, I gotta hit the bell on that one. That's how you do it, Tom. That's how you do it as a young man. That's how you do it.
A young man. So I had just turned 28 years old when he won the world title.
Oh wow!
So I got an early start training high quality level boxers, and like I said, I tried to presume a little bit of a career at the time when he asked me to train him. But when I got that opportunity, I saw how much talent he had, and I kind of like weighed it out because of the injuries that I had. And I just felt like I could give him so much of my knowledge, and he had such a great talent that I took that opportunity training him and really went into the training full time. Because at the same time that I was trying to come back training, I had actually built at the same time a stable of fighters as well.
Oh wow!
So I really had a stable of fighters. Plus, I had the opportunity to work with him, and I just looked at him as such a great talent, and I really believed he could be champion of the world. So I started really putting a lot of time and effort in him. And like I said, from the time I started training him, it was about 2.5 years later, he became lightweight champion. Oh wow! So yeah, he was. I first started working when he was 10-0, and then I was the full-time trainer when he was about 13-0, 14-0, and then he became 27-0 lightweight champion of the world.
Oh, wow.
So from there, I kept on. I had trained the group of the kids that I was training. I had to, like over this period of time, as we stand now, I've trained 16 national champions. And I trained, like I said, I got Calvin Brock had come to me. And I trained Calvin, and he fought for the heavyweight championship of the world against Vladimir.
Yes. And you know what? I had Calvin to win that fight. That's how much I liked him back then. I thought he was going to win that fight.
We had a good shot, you know. But Vladimir's proved to be one of the great champions of all time. Yeah, for sure. And you know, unfortunately, after that fight, I don't know if you realize it. You know, Calvin ended up suffering a detached retina, right? And he had surgery on his eye, and then he ended up, when he was in surgery, he ended up going blind in his left eye. He's still blind to this day in that eye, which is really sad. But I felt like Calvin, if he wouldn't have fought, he would have fought anybody else for the heavyweight championship that night, because at the time Klitschko had 2 belts, but there was also 2 other champions that we would have fought. I believe it was at the time Asim Rockman and Oleg Moskaev. I felt like, you know, Calvin would have been heavyweight champion of the world.
Yeah, but that's not how Calvin's going to move. Calvin's going right to Klitschko.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, had the opportunity, really felt like we could beat him at the time. And, you know, I mean, Vladimir's proven that after that, he went on a winning streak that's just legendary. So, I mean, he's a great champion. You could argue where he places in history, but one of the greats of all time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is what we have to talk about.
Okay.
We have to talk about Roy Jones Jr. We have to talk about Roy. Now, I need to ask you this because I've been curious about this forever. Roy Jones Jr., in my opinion, is a genius in the ring. I think that physically he's a genius, and it's something that I definitely believe in. I think your body is smart. I think your body has an intelligence. And I think a lot of times your body does things, and that's why you want to build muscle memory, but it does things that others can't do. It does things when you're not conscious about it, when you're not actually just, you know, consciously trying to make it do those things. Sometimes it does it on its own. I think Roy Jones Jr. was blessed with a genius level body. But on top of that, I also see him as a genius mind in the ring. And he's gone on to train himself. I've heard testimonies from fighters under him saying that he's just the best trainer. So I'm very curious, how does one train someone of the level of Roy Jones Jr.? You would think, well, he doesn't have much. Look, I remember fights where Alton, his ex-trainer, right? He'll tell him things, And it looks like Roy is just, hey, pour water on my head. Yeah. And it's like he knew already. How does one go about training a guy like Roy Jones Jr., who was just a genius level fighter and a great fighter?
Well, you never abandon the fundamentals. You always sharpen those tools up, But as for this fight, I am looking at the archives. A lot of people talk about watching the opponent and what you need to do to capitalize on the opponent's weaknesses. And that is true. And that's one of the things that I'm doing, looking at the things that Mike does that you can capitalize, the weaknesses that he has, you can capitalize. But I'm also looking at what Roy has to nullify and to capitalize on those weaknesses, but also nullify his strengths. So the things that Roy has done in the past that maybe he hasn't done in a while, like I watched footage of Roy being a middleweight, in a super middleweight, because these are the skill sets that he's going to need against a guy like Iron Mike Tyson. Okay,
I'm ringing the bell. I'm sorry. Okay, let's go. I love that. Go ahead.
So he's gonna, and that's the advantage that he has, because the guy. You could, without a doubt, really, if you sit there and you watch, in history that the lighter guys have the better skill sets than the heavyweights.
Right. 100%.
Heavyweights are big guys; they got a lot of power, but so that is the skill set that he's going to have, that use those lighter skill sets to be able to beat a guy like Roy, to beat a guy like Mike Tyson. So you're working on capitalizing on Mike's weaknesses, and you're trying to nullify his strengths, and you're studying that, but you're also studying on the past fights of what Roy has done, the things that he's done in the past that he needs to do in this fight. So you're refreshing his memory on saying, see what you did in this fight? This is one of the tools we need for this fight. So I'm watching certain things that he's done in the past, and I'm refreshing his memory. You see how you did this? See what you did here? This is something you need to bring to this fight. This is what's going to work in this fight coming up, because look what you did to this guy like this, and this is the same kind of things that Mike does. You need to use it here. Use what you see what I'm saying?
Okay,
so,
yeah.
And there's a few things that, like, without letting the cat out of the bag, that he's done maybe just a few times in his career that I really feel that are going to work in this fight.
Right.
So he's going to bring those to the table as well. A lot of things that probably people even forget that he's capable of doing, because he really I believe as a middleweight and super middleweight, his skill set and his fundamentals and the skills that his technique, if you will, he was more geared into fundamentals at that time. When he became a light heavyweight, he became so dominant because he had still had that skill set. He went up to the heavier guys who didn't have the skill set, and he almost became bored. So when boredom happens sometimes, and you just do whatever you want to do, those other things become rusty.
Okay. Now, you just opened a whole can of worms with everything you said that is so amazing. And I'm going to try to break it down a little bit and ask some questions. You brought up fundamentals. Okay. Now, Roy Jones Jr., he was never really known as a fundamentally sound fighter. All right. Now,
and I always beg to differ with people if they watch early on.
Well, absolutely. But I just want to say that when people ask me that question, I think Roy Jones Jr. was extremely skillful. But on top of that, I never wanted Roy Jones Jr. What made him so great was that he was a Ferrari. I didn't want him to drive like a sedan, drive like a truck, be the best Ferrari. A lot of people talk about Muhammad Ali not going to the body enough. And I'm like, well, if Muhammad Ali changed what he was, he probably wouldn't have been able to, maximize all the gifts that he actually had. I think Roy Jones Jr. maximized those things. When I talked to Joe Cortez, I asked him, I said, who's greater, Roy Jones Jr. or Bernard Hopkins? And he said, well, Roy Jones Jr. was greater in his prime. Bernard Hopkins was greater outside his prime. And I'm bringing that up to say that it's the general idea or consensus or thought of Roy Jones Jr. that he never had those fundamentals, that foundation. So when he got older, it was exploited because his athletic and his athleticism kind of wavered with his age. Right. What say you about that?
I totally disagree.
Okay.
I feel that people have based his decline on his slowing of reflexes and his feet not being as well. Of course, they had a little bit to do because he had used his feet so well. But again, I truly believe that wasn't the big part of it. The big part of it was that he got away from a lot of things, like I said, because as a light heavyweight, he became so dominant that he got away from the things. If you watch footage and you really watch closely on the things that he did as a middleweight and super middleweight, they were technically very, very on a very high level. And he was, if you watch the two fights against Hopkins, you'll see just in the way he fought those fights. Well, like I said, we're not letting a lot out of the bag, but if you even watch the way, some of the, like I said, without letting cat out of the bag, fundamental certain things that he did in the first fight that he didn't do in the second fight is what I believe made the difference. Because, listen, when he fought Bernard the second time, he was still the faster guy with the better reflexes.
100%. 100%.
So you know what I mean? So the difference had to be something else.
Okay, great point.
Not only do you see the difference of Roy from the first fight to the second fight, you also see what Bernard Hopkins learned in his career
100%.
from fighting a guy like Roy Jones, and knew that he had to make up for speed deficit. So he had to change his fundamentals. If you look at the way he fought in the first fight and you watch the way he fought in the second fight, it's a guy with a different approach, definitely a different approach on knowing how to gauge range and knowing how he had to position his body and how he had to positioning can beat speed. Because if you have two guys that have the same position, then the speed can rule. But if you have a guy that has more speed, but you have better position, you can outdo that speed.
100%.
So, that's something that just watching those two fights, if you know what you're looking at, you could see that both guys made adjustments from the first fight to the second fight, where I feel like, Bernard made the improvements that he needed to, and Roy kind of just left some of his things in the shed and left those tools that he had in the first fight. He didn't bring them out and he didn't use them, and they were rusty because of the time that he had not been using them for all those years in the 2000s, where he was just, late 90s. Like, to me, a technically great prime Roy Jones to me is from 92 to 98. When he fought James Toney, he was ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
Not just talented, very, very, very underrated. Like when people talk about it, underrated skill set. The skill set was just, he was fabulous. I mean, and he used his jab a lot more. Like I said, I don't want to get into a lot of
right. Absolutely.
But he definitely had a much better skill set. Where as I said, as he fought guys that didn't have, as he went up in divisions, like we talked about, the skill set lessons. So he needed less skill set to be such dominant because of the speed factor.
Okay, and that's a great segue, and I'm going to go back to something you said before, and it all kind of makes sense. And Roy, he said it many times himself about getting bored and not being able to get up for the fight, kind of like when he fought Tarver the second time. Yeah, he went up to heavyweight, he beat John Ruiz, he wanted to come back down and regain the title. He was thinking about Bob Fitzsimmons, and he was talking about just doing some historic things. The second, from then on, Roy just couldn't really get up for a fight. And it makes me think about what Abraham Lincoln said. Abraham Lincoln, he had this invention, a ferry invention. And he has this quote, and I don't want to misquote the great Abraham Lincoln, but he says something about when he received the patent for the ferry, he said that it added fuel to the interest of the fire of genius or something like that. So he was saying that patent kind of sparked even more genius of him. And when you think about Roy taking on Iron Mike Tyson, it's kind of like that's the fuel for his interest of genius. So he always needed a steep dangerous climb to kind of get something out of Roy, because you're not going to get the best out of Roy when Roy just sees this as just another routine thing. He's been dominant for so long. What say you about that? This actually being such a great challenge that you may just get the best from Roy Jones Jr.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like, you know, and this one lights the fire, you know, because this was talked about years ago happening.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's always been in the back of his mind. And, you know, there's a lot of pride and ego. These are all-time greats. This is the Legend Series, you know, so you got bragging rights forever on a thing like this. And yeah, the intensity of importance is definitely elevated, you know. And, I mean, to go back into those fights that he fought against Tarver, I mean, he even had discussions with me saying, I had all the things that I needed to be able to beat him, but what I needed – he even told me, if you were in my corner refreshing me on certain things, we'd beat him. I would beat him. Wow. So he you know, he had expressed that to me, that if I had been in the corner to just refresh his memory on some of the things against Hopkins and Tarver, he'd have won those fights. You know, I mean, and here in this fight, me refreshing his memory on top of the importance of, you know, the fight for, like I said, all-time status of greatness and bragging rights, has really put him in tune to the things that I'm talking to him about and showing him that I know that this is what you got to do in this fight. And he's really in tune to that detail in a way more intensely, you know what I mean? Right. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big deal for these guys, because, I mean, it's an exhibition, but I mean, the only thing that's been classified that's really made it an exhibition, but the only things that has separated it from being a real fight and an exhibition is, as far as I'm concerned, from what I see, is 8 rounds instead of 10 or 12.
Right.
And we got 12-ounce gloves and 12-ounce gloves instead of 10s, which is not a big – we're not putting 16-ounce sparring gloves on. These guys got velocity and punches where 2 ounces – there's not much of a difference there, and they're not wearing any headgear. So, I mean, other than that, there's nothing been really told us that, oh, this is, you know, you're supposed to pull your punches or not do, or don't, you know, there hasn't been no kind of limitations on these guys going at it. It's just they're putting a little bit bigger gloves on them, and they're going less rounds.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Now, I'm not sure if you know, I spent some time at Tyson Ranch with Iron Mike Tyson, and I spent a week there. Now, wow. Yeah. Now, recently, yes, like was July. It was the end of July. It was end of July. So not that recent, but recent enough. Like around August, I think I came back. But I want to say this: I see it as a fight. I see it as a fight for so many reasons, not just the air that I was getting from Team Tyson, not just that, but when everyone talks about Iron Mike Tyson being a warrior, which he is, Iron Mike Tyson is something else. When everyone talk about him, I also see Roy Jones Jr. as an animal. This is the thing that I think people miss. Okay, I saw Roy Jones Jr. maybe 2 months ago on a special. Steve Collins, I believe, called him out, and he was like, sign the contract. You can't call out Roy Jones. You can't. Roy Jones will fight anybody, anywhere, anytime. I remember him talking about fighting Lennox Lewis. I remember him talking about fighting Evander Holyfield. This guy is a warrior. He's an animal, and they're animals of different sizes, naturally, of course. But there is no way Iron Mike Tyson only knows one speed, and there is no way Roy Jones Jr. keeps playing or tries to play or pull a punch. If he sees Iron Mike Tyson coming at him viciously, the animal will come out of Roy Jones Jr. I see this as a fight more so than an exhibition. I do, because of the two guys in the ring. Right. Period.
Right. And styles make fights. I mean, what's Mike going to do? Mike going to box Roy? He's not going to outbox Roy.
No, he's going to try to knock him out.
Tries to do that, you know. I mean, he's got, like you said, one speed. You know, and he's gonna force the fight. If he doesn't force the fight, hey, that's fine. You know, we know he has to force the fight to be able to win the fight. You know, so I mean, you know, like he wouldn't force the fight. It would just be a boxing match, and Roy's going to outbox him every day of the week.
Well, to that point, I have. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and you know, when he brings the fight, like I said, we're working on all the things that we need for this fight. You know?
I know that.
And you know, there's you know, of course, we've seen some blueprint on Mike Tyson, on things that guys have done to beat him. And, you know, of course, we're watching that. But, you know, like I said, again, I don't think he's fought a boxer, even any of the guys that have beaten him. And I have great respect for those guys. Evander Holyfield's one of the greats of all time, not district, but there's still Roy Jones has a skill set that is, you know, better than anybody Mike has ever faced.
100%. Now, when you talk about Roy Jones Jr. boxing, Tyson wouldn't want to go on and try to outbox Roy Jones Jr. That'd be a bad thing to do. But I did speak with Billy White, who is Iron Mike Tyson's trainer, and I spoke with him in an interview on this channel. And Billy White said that Roy Jones Jr. is going to run like a thief. What say you about those words, Roy Jones Jr. running like a thief?
Well, you know, if you look, like I said, don't want to let out too much, but
right.
One thing, if you hit spot on when you watch certain videos that we've done with pad work and stuff. One thing I can tell you, you know, Mike Tyson has had 44 knockouts maybe in his career out of 50-some fights or whatever. And but one thing I never talk about, even though Roy's fought more fights, he's knocked out 47 guys.
Let's go! Let's go!
So
he knocked out more people than Iron Mike Tyson.
Right. I mean, he's fought more guys, but he's knocked out. So, I mean, Roy has never been short of power, and he's not coming into this one short of power. He's bigger than he's ever been. And they always say any man over 200 pounds can hurt you, but Roy's a guy who was a puncher all the way up, and now he's over 200 pounds. That power is it's increasing, not decreasing. And he's learning how to, you know, he's sitting on his punches a lot more than he ever has. So, you know, we're not coming into this fight thinking that we can run and just powder puff, you know. And I mean, you know, anybody that's ever given Mike Tyson trouble hit him hard. Holyfield hit him hard. Buster Douglas hit him hard.
That's
you know, you got it. You know, you're not gonna. You can run, but you can't hide. We're full aware of that. So you know, we're not coming in to hide.
Right. Well, 100%. And what I saw, and like I said, I'm not expecting you to, you know, give away the secrets, but like you said, what I saw was Roy Jones Jr. sitting down on some vicious punches, vicious shots, and I must admit, when I first looked at Iron Mike Tyson, his training, I said, Roy doesn't have a chance. That's why in my video, I said, wait, are we sleeping on Roy? We need to start looking at more of Roy's videos, because the punches he's throwing, I don't care who you are. That's a cut eye. That's a broken nose. You get wobbled. You can't get hit that many times, that fast, that hard by a professional fighter, especially somebody weighing over 200 pounds, especially somebody of the caliber of Roy Jones Jr. Like I said, with guys like Iron Mike Tyson, like, you can't run out the ring. Sometimes you got to fight them off of you.
Right. And you said it best when I watched your video. You said, you know, his feet may have slowed down a little bit, but the hand speed seems to be, you said,
right.
You know, and I can tell you that, you know, I worked with him 10 years ago, and I work with him now, and the hand speed hasn't changed from when I work with him.
Wait a minute. You've been with Roy for 10 years?
I worked with Roy in the past. We met 10 years ago, and I worked with him for 2 fights, and we worked together. So yeah, we know each other. We've worked, and over time, I had a lot of things going on, and he had a lot of things going on. And we kind of like, it was just, but we've always kept in touch throughout the years. We've always talked boxing with each other periodically throughout the last 8 years. And actually, we actually have trained it. We trained together for 2 fights that I was in the corner. I was the chief second. And then after that, for like 2 or 3 years, he would come up and still do training sessions with me. We would talk boxing and train. So over the last 5 years, we haven't worked together. He boxed another 3 years. He's been off for about 2.5 years. So like the last 3 years that he boxed, I wasn't working with him, but we still always kept in touch. And when this fight got announced, I just hit him up and says, this one makes a lot of sense for us to get back together on this and really work together on this, because we always work good together. It wasn't something that we stopped working together because we weren't working well together. So there was a lot of other intangibles. Me, I had a lot of fighters. He was going all kinds of different directions, whether he was going to box, whether he wasn't. He had HBO that he was still working for. He was doing, so there was a lot of traveling that was involved when I was working with him. It was taking me away from my gym, and just a lot of things that he was doing that was just hard for our schedules and everything to jive. But for this fight, it all makes sense for us to put things aside, make things happen, to be able to work together the way we did in the past, because we worked very well together in the past. And I reached out to him, and he said, yeah, man, it makes a lot of sense, man. Let's get together and do this, So that's how that went down. But
I love this. I love it.
Yeah, so, what you said is that in that interview that I watched, or that video that I watched, is you said that he hasn't lost hand speed. You don't see the hand speed. So
right.
That is one of my points that people are not taking into consideration. Speed is power, and now you got a guy who has the same speed that he had. If it's went down, believe me, from 10 years it hasn't, from when I worked with him in the past. So if you got that same speed, and now you're putting this guy, and he's 205, 210, you got more weight behind that speed. You got a puncher. He's always been a puncher.
It's going to hurt.
He's a heavyweight puncher. I mean, I've held pads for Calvin Brock, who was a very good puncher. He had knockout of the year 2006. I mean, he knocked a lot of guys out. He had a very high percentage of knockout ratio. I trained even a smaller heavyweight who fought for the Cruiserweight Championship of the World against Marco Huck, Brian Minto. He knocked many guys out as well.
I remember Brian Minto. That was you?
That was me. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I trained Teddy Reed, who was one of a great puncher. So I've worked with I know what a feeling of a puncher feels like on hand pads. I train a kid right now. He's 7-0 with 7 knockouts. He was a national Golden Glove champion in 2018, Keontae Irving. I mean, he knocked guys out at the national level. But my point is, I've trained a lot of punchers, and I can tell you, Roy is punching at a very high intensity. It's definitely at heavyweight intensity. It's not Chris Bird heavyweight intensity. It's power. It's heavyweight power. I'm not saying it's Lennox Lewis power or, even Mike Tyson power, but it ain't power that you will come out without respect.
Well. I say this all the time on my channel. When they say who's the harder puncher, that doesn't really concern me so much. I always saw it as punch to chin ratio. So yeah, let's look at Deontay Wilder versus Tyson, the Gypsy King Fury. Deontay Wilder is definitely the harder puncher, but Tyson Fury dropped him a few times and then finished the fight. It's who can take whose punches. So so Iron Mike Tyson, we know he'd knock out anybody, right? But my thing is, he has to absorb some punches too, and because you're a hard puncher, don't mean you can take a hard punch. So I absolutely I hear you there. Now,
I mean, we know in the past that Mike has showed a pretty good chin. But he has been hurt too, though. You know what I mean? And he's not fighting a guy like Buster Douglas and Evander Holyfield, really good punchers. Roy was a devastating puncher with either hand at the lighter divisions. As a heavyweight, you could juggle and argue whether he's as hard a puncher as a guy like Holyfield. He was a good puncher, but not a great puncher, where I would even classify Roy at the lighter divisions as a better puncher.
A devastating puncher.
For sure, right? So now he's going heavier. Does he carry it as much as Holyfield would have? It's debatable, but Holyfield hurt Tyson. So we're in that realm of having the power to hurt any heavyweight Roy has the ability to hurt any heavyweight out there, good chin or no chin.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing.
No chin.
I want to make things clear to my showbiz, the adult community right here. I'm not saying, or I don't think we're discussing Roy Jones Jr. knocking out Mike Tyson. You don't, what discouraging Mike Tyson from just overwhelming Roy Jones can be enough to win this fight. We're talking about delivering enough pain to where Iron Mike Tyson is now thinking, and then maybe you could break him down, mentally, maybe discourage him, those things, and all of a sudden Roy Jones can run away with the fight. That's what we're talking about as far as delivering the type of punches that can hurt, that can harm a fighter. Not saying that Roy Jones going to one punch devastate, knock him out or anything like that. We're talking about how hard he punched and what that can do as far as the game plan for the fight.
Absolutely. I mean, when you set a tone of respect and all the other intangibles in your skill set is able to be amplified, because, when you get hit with a shot that even if it doesn't knock you out, or it gets your attention to the point where you say, if you can put the seed in the guy's head to think that he can be knocked out, that's enough.
That's it.
I mean?
That's it. Yeah. Now you did talk about something. You mentioned it a few times, and we must make this a focus at least for a second. The weight. What is the desired weight for Roy Jones Jr. coming into this fight? I mean, I know you've done conditioning and stuff like that as well with diets and things like that. So what say you about his weight and the desired weight for optimal performance from Roy Jones Jr.?
Well, I'll tell you, he's been looking great in the gym right now. I mean, he's moving well and hitting, with great speed. And he's been, around the 205, 210. 207, 208. So, hard training, healthy food, and his body's going to tell us where it's supposed to be. We're not going to do anything drastic either way. We're not going to try to put on weight. We're not going to try to cut any weight. Where he's at right now, it's about just being in great shape and eating the right things for the optimal nutrition to have each workout be at its utmost, and carry that into the ring. I mean, I would imagine he's going to be pretty close to where he's at now. He's like I said, anywhere from 205, 210. I would say the heaviest you'll see him is 210. The lightest you'll see him is 205. That's where he's been right now, and he's in pretty good shape. As he gets in better shape, a lot of things people don't realize is that a lot of the guys in the lighter weight classes, they're cutting weight at the end, but they're going back to their walk around weight. You know what I mean? Guys are like 168, but they're walking around 180 something. And then they're cutting to 68 and they're going back up to 180. So, we don't have to do a cut. So our whole thing is we're coming in pretty much, and muscle is weight as well too. So as we train harder, as we pick up the intensity, he may put on a little muscle, lose a little bit of fat. But at the same time, it's probably going to end up being where it's even right now this far out. I would say anywhere from 205 to 210. And I think, he's going to be tremendous at that because right now he's looking very good at that weight. The better condition and better cardio and better in shape he gets in, it's just going to be amplified, at this weight. I don't think there's any reason to come any lower or go really any higher than we are right now.
Yeah. To your point, Alexander Usyk. Let's take that. I mean, Alexander Usyk. Who knows? There are people that saying, "Wait, he's going to be more dominant as a heavyweight than he was as a cruiserweight because he was cutting weight and doing all those things. He may be the healthier fighter as a heavyweight than he was as a cruiserweight."
Absolutely.
I want to say this just to round out our interview. This will be my last question as far as Roy Jones in the future. Do you see Roy Jones actually joining the Legends Only League, having a fight after this? Or do you see this as, Roy Jones, look, Mike Tyson said he wanted to scrap. They called me and I answered the call. Do you see anything after this?
Well, I'll tell you, Roy Jones he'll never cease to amaze you. You're always could be in for a surprise with Roy. You can never say never, that he's never going to fight again. Like I said, that's for him to really reveal. but I would never put anything past him not fighting again. I would never put anything on past him retiring as well, you know? So I think it all depends on the intensity of the challenge.
Yeah. Yep. That's what we were talking about before, right? I knew that was coming.
So, you know, he's not going to just fight to fight after this, but if the right challenge presents itself, it's hard for Roy to turn down a challenge. It's just the way he is, and that's why he was a great champion. You know, he was a great champion because he has that, you know, that fight in him. You know, he's not going to turn down a challenge. And so, like I said, it all comes down to what challenge is presented to him, and that will be a big part of his decision. And if the right challenge is in front of him, I don't see him turning things down. You know, it all depends on what that challenge is. This one right here is a prime example. A prime example. You knew when it was funny because when the fight got announced that Mike Tyson was going to fight, but they really didn't come out with him fighting an opponent. They just said he was making a comeback.
Right.
You can remember.
Right. And then it was like they were talking about Bob Sapp, right? And then they were talking about Shannon Briggs, and there was like all these guys like kind of raising their hands. We didn't really know what was going on.
And I told my wife, I says, if they present that to Roy, I said, he's fighting Mike Tyson. So I automatically, when that happened, when I heard that Tyson was going to fight, I specifically stayed in tune to Roy's social media and stuff, as I says, they announce this fight, I'm calling. You know? Because on my YouTube channel, my World Class Boxing channel, I have, because Mike Tyson, I mean, I really enjoyed him as a kid, watching him fight. He was, you know, I was, when he was champion, I was probably 15, 16 at the time. So he, you know, I really, really watched him, and I studied him, you know, grew up really watching him. So I really enjoyed his style. So I've done a lot of studying of Mike as well. And I've done, on my YouTube channel, I've done a dozen videos on his style and certain things that he does, small things that instructionals that he does, and teaching and breaking down some of his moves. I've done a dozen of them. And at the time that I heard that he was going to fight, I was basically in the process of brainstorming that I was going to do a longer instructional video on the peekaboo style and the way he used it, you know, how Mike used it, you know, and I was going to be more like an hour and a half video for purchase. And as soon as that, so I was thinking a lot about Mike.
I know what you're saying.
Just to add this too, it's funny how certain things are, right? When, you know, I'm thinking about doing this video, and then I hear he's going to fight again. And I said that to my wife, that if he challenges Roy, they're going to fight. And then I see Roy's going to fight him. Then I said, well, I ain't going to do the instructional no more. I'm not going to break any more down. I'm just going to go into trying to really, well, even though I could break it down, I'm going to be looking at a different reason why I'm breaking it down now. You know, and it's funny. I moved in this house 10 years ago, and when this fight gets announced, I just wasn't even thinking about it. And I look on my wall, and I put this up 10 years ago.
Wow, I'm looking at it.
And Mike Tyson right next to each other on my wall.
Wow. And look at that. Fate has it. Fate has it. But
10 years later, they're going to fight. And Roy came to my house when he came to my house a couple weeks ago. You know, he saw that and took a picture of it. I told him, I said, I didn't change that. That was like that 10 years ago. I didn't put that up for just now because you're fighting him, you know? He's like, wow, isn't it something, you know?
Well, what you said was intimidating. That's the word I'm looking for. When you said that you've been studying Mike so long that you were able to put together an instruction video on his style. What are you saying, Tom? What you saying? You know all his strengths and his weaknesses?
Well, I definitely do. I know, you know, over the years, I mean, there's certain things that he does, but, you know, and I've watched the things that, like I said, that guys have done that have been very successful when they fought him, the guys that have been successful, what they've done. I know certain things that he does when he's at certain ranges that he tries to do when he's in certain range. You know, it's hard to tell. Like I said, people don't talk about in this event that much is that the disparity in inactivity. You know, Mike has been inactive since 2005.
15 years.
Roy, yeah, 15 years. I mean, and Roy has been boxing all the way up to 2018.
Yep, he's still active.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 years of inactivity. There's guys that are considered active fighters today that fight once every year or 2 years.
That's why I say he's actually active.
Yeah,
in comparison, he's actually active.
And if we look at the end of Mike's career 15 years ago, it wasn't that pretty. Right. So, you know, his body looks great. I'm sure he's going to be in tremendous shape. You know, he looks great on the pads. He looks great on the bag, you know. But my experience in boxing, inactivity can definitely play a factor in big fights. I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard against Hagler could prove us wrong.
100%.
But for the most part, inactivity, you know, even Leonard was a 3-year, but he had one fight within the 5 years. This is still 15 years. It's not 5.
Right,
you know?
right.
And Roy has always been in the gym as well, even after he retired in 2018, training other fighters. You know what I mean? Where Mike has had a transformation in his body over the years. We've seen him in the Hangover movies where he was heavy, you know.
Right.
And so that kind of yo-yoing with your body can have an effect as well.
Well, even a great puncher like George
you know,
Foreman, when he was gone for years, when he came back, he fought like 13 times in 2 years to get his timing together. So yeah, I understand your point.
It is, you know. So there's no denying that he's looked like he's in great shape, and he's looked great in his pad work and things like that. But like I'm just saying, that to me is, you know, if I will say, I feel like that is a factor. You know, I feel like Roy has been, you know, it's one thing, even when I've learned throughout the years, it's one thing of sparring in the gym, but being under those lights,
yeah,
the intensity of it is a different thing. And when your body has lost that muscle memory and has been, you know, it becomes such a foreign thing that even sometimes looking great in the gym, you come into that ring. But at the same time, on his side of the coin, what we could say is that what Sugar Ray Leonard said, what I thought was one of the greatest statements that I ever heard. You know, sometimes remember this. Sugar Ray Leonard says, when there's a fight of this intensity, when he was going to fight Hagler, he said, when there's a fight of this intensity, there is no ring rust. Because yeah, when there's I might have been quoting it not perfectly, but when there's a fight of this high of magnitude, of the intensity level of this, you know, there is no ring rust. It's almost like being in a street fight. You're not going to tell a guy, I need a couple weeks to train for the fight and get the rust off.
No, it comes out.
Your adrenaline is flowing at a high level. So you see, everything's peaked. You know, all your senses are peaked, and everything's peaked because of the intensity of the event. And this is a worldwide intensity here. The whole world wants to see it. You know,
100%. I'll be there.
Because Mike is bigger than, and so is Roy, but for that matter. But I mean, Mike is a world star outside of the boxing ring now. He's got, you know, his CBD products, his other things that he got going on, and Roy's doing the same thing. But Mike, you know, has so
icon.
Yeah, he's an icon. He's so many followers throughout the whole world. Like if you ask people on the street, who's the first boxer they named? They named
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson. It was back in the day. Now it's starting to dwindle as the years go on. It used to be Muhammad Ali. Now it's Mike Tyson. Because 100%. The general public, like my neighbors, they're not boxing. Some of them are not boxing fans at all. They knew Mike Tyson was, but they didn't know who Roy Jones was. Yep. As great as Roy was, because they have the only reason they know, because they have no concept of they don't watch boxing at all, but they watch movies.
Yeah.
Tyson, The Hangover. I mean, Roy was in, I believe, The Matrix, but Mike has been a lot more a visible person outside of boxing than Roy has. So the whole world is watching, even if you're a boxing fan or you're not a boxing fan. You hear those names, and especially Mike Tyson, people are going to watch. So the intensity of the event is huge.
Hey, look, everybody, make sure that find a way. The Triller app, right? That's the platform right now. Make sure that you grab some popcorn, get some drinks, grab a chair, and tune in November 28th, Roy Jones Jr. versus Iron Mike Tyson. And if you are a wagering person, I got to pay the bills. BUSR.com/showbiz. Make sure you go there, put a little wager on a fight. For Tom, thank you for coming out. And really, I hope to have you here on this platform again. This was actually extremely fun, and I can talk to you for 5 to 6 hours. I know that right now. I'm trying to do my best because I have so much to say. But do you have anything to say to your fans or to anyone about your channel or plugs or anything like that? Please.
I just want to, I appreciate you having me on ShowBizz, man. I really enjoy your videos, and make sure, you guys, everybody checks out my World Class Boxing channel. I come out with two small instructional videos every week, and I'm going to be continuing doing that. And I'm going to try to, as time goes on, I'll be adding a third day, and I'm going to be also doing Q&As on my channel where you guys can ask me questions about boxing,
fantastic.
Things like that. So make sure you guys go like, subscribe, and share the videos as well, because it's spreading great knowledge of the game. And like I said, again, I really appreciate you having me on, man. And I would look forward to coming on again. November 28th. Make sure you guys stay tuned. Roy Jones will be ready.
Absolutely. Best of luck to you and Team Roy and Roy Jones Jr. Man, this is phenomenal. Thank you so much. Showbiz, little adult. I'm out. Huh.